Thank you for joining us for this episode of Inside Town Hall. I'm your host, Madeline Shields. We have a full house this month. Every few months we invite several city councilors for a roundtable discussion, and we're going to talk about what the most important topics to the city of Sioux Falls are. And joining me for this month, we have Christine Erickson, we have Rick Kiley, and Greg Neitzert. Thanks for joining us. So our unemployment rate in Sioux Falls in South Dakota is actually 1.9%. And what is the city doing in terms of workforce development to bring people in to fill the almost 11,000 jobs that are open?
You know, that's a great point. I think that's truly the lowest it's ever been in 21 years, and with that comes challenges. We want a low employment rate, but also then where do we find the folks to do those jobs and the everyday work? So we've looked as a city. You know, we're open for business. We've been open for business, and we've been a recruiting hub for anything from law enforcement on up to anything else that you can imagine. That we are seeing people moving here with lots of different license plates, and so it's making sure we can plug them into fitting a job that works for them and making sure that they're a part of the community as well. And
in terms of workforce development, we need to do everything we can to attract and then retain workforce. I've read recently that the state is offering a $1,000 to out-of-state residents that come in to South Dakota and work, I think a minimum of 90 days. So those are some of the things that are being done. But I think we can look within as well, too. Many individuals with disabilities are available and really have the desire to contribute to the community. And I've always been a great proponent of individuals with disabilities because my sister Ruth had one too. So I think that's a segment of the population that we have overlooked. We also need to support, in my opinion, educational efforts as they have a high return on our investment. As an educator, I'm naturally going to think that. But over the last 4 years, this city council has allocated $600,000 to Southeast Technical College to enhance their educational programming in an effort to address the city's workforce needs. They've recently introduced a new position called the Director of Access and Workforce Opportunity. The director will work with underrepresented students to improve their recruitment, retention, and graduation rates of minority students and first-generation Americans. They have started in recent years a vet tech, veterinarian technician program. They're starting year two of that program, and it has been at maximum capacity. So they could double the space available and it'd probably still be at maximum capacity. And they have had one of my favorite programs they've operated is called Classrooms to Careers. They're in year 3 of this program in cooperation with Sanford Health and First Premier Bank. The program services, again, first generation diverse high school students at Washington High School. What's the return on investment on this? Almost 100 students have gone through the program, with a third eventually attending Southeast, a third attending another institution of higher learning, and the remaining third joining the workforce or the military. So that's just one example. I think if we work cooperatively with the area high schools and the universities, we could do even more.
And 2 more programs that we've been able to help fund, which is really exciting, is dental assistance. We're in year 2 of that program at Southeast. That has been full at max capacity both years as well. And then as well, we have the mobile construction laboratory that Southeast is now doing. So they're partnering with Henry Carlson and the Home Builders and the Association of General Contractors. And they now have a mobile teaching facility where so the students can learn on the job, but they're also helping to build and repair low-income housing. And recently they've partnered with Habitat for Humanity. So not only are they learning, but they're helping to solve our housing shortage. So that's really exciting as well.
By recruiting the high school students into these kind of programs, is there a much better chance that they will stay in the city of Sioux Falls or in this area to continue their careers and raise their families rather than leaving South Dakota or leaving the city?
I truly think it does. We don't just want to attract people to come, but we want to retain them. So while they're going to STC or any of the other universities in town, we want to make sure we're getting them plugged into the community and plugged into that next role. I recently sat down with some business partners who are looking at donating more funds to the Build Dakota Scholarship to being able to keep people here, and also funding some of the schooling that they can themselves. Getting those high school students in, whether it's a computer programming, whatever that program is, to get them in, working through high school, going through the school process, and then hiring them back even at a higher wage when they've learned the process. I think that's important for the business partners to also identify those needs, and for us to all collaborate and work together as we identify the needs in our community.
And I think the business partners that have participated to date in these programmings, they know exactly what they're doing, because Sanford and Avera and First Premier Bank and Henry Carlson Company, when they're actively involved with those high school students now, there is a much greater chance that that student is going to become very comfortable in that environment and with that particular employer, and most likely stay and continue.
Okay, well, great. Now, if we have all these folks here working, they have to have somewhere to live. So let's talk about our housing situation here in the city of Sioux Falls. It's no secret that it's been tight. It has been tight for quite some time, whether it's single-family homes or apartment buildings. Let's talk a little bit about what is going to happen now and in the future to have a place for these folks to live.
Housing is very critical, whether you're here short-term or long-term, whether you're a student or you're in a career. And so we as a council have really made it a priority. We've started a housing fund. We've played a critical role in the state workforce housing needs for their summer study. It's not just a Sioux Falls issue, it's a statewide issue, and it's regional, because oftentimes we see people pick their heads up from surrounding communities to come work or shop or play. And so we really need to look at it as that regional impact. The other thing that I think is important to note is that housing looks different for so many people. The American dream isn't just a house with a 2 or 3 car and a dog and 2 boys and 2 girls or whatever it is. Housing looks so different that people aren't wanting to be as tied down to maybe their home, and want to have a lifestyle that they can travel more or be a little bit more mobile. And so with that comes housing of apartments, the tiny home community. Whatever those look like, I think is important to recognize that we need that higher density. We only have so much land, and truly housing has just gotten more expensive with all of the things that have happened the last couple of years, getting product in and getting it moved around. It's made it extremely difficult, and so we as a council, in my opinion, and the state need to find those barriers that exist and removing those, so it's not more onerous to build a home, and there's not all these hoops that we have to jump through, making sure we get those building permits out immediately, making sure that these laws are safe for the community, but also that we're not adding extra burden and cost when we are building homes in apartment complexes.
And I think also as a city, we have a responsibility of acquiring land for redevelopment and attempting as much as possible to relocate existing homes to other areas, because usually those homes are on the affordable housing level and are in great need. We have to, as Councilor Erickson mentioned, we have to focus on increasing density and infilling development, identifying areas where that have not been developed within our existing city limits, and developing those, because it saves us dollars to infill versus continue to expand, because we don't invest all that additional money into infrastructure that's required for housing.
In short, there's not one solution to this problem. It's multifaceted. It is we do have growth and we continue to grow outward, but we have to figure out how we can do infill development, make that easier, particularly in existing neighborhoods where we can get good quality housing and have it be something that the neighborhoods can embrace, because change is hard. Having good regulations but not having overburdensome regulations, thinking about what that balance is, with our floodplain regulations. Are we making development impossible? So thinking about all of those things and making things work together in neighborhoods, be able to live in harmony and have different uses. It doesn't have to be all one homogeneous zoning area, so things like that.
When you're talking about getting people to move back into the core, some of the houses are smaller and some of the houses are old. And let's talk a little bit about what some of the codes are with those homes and how that can be burdensome to some people to try to remodel those homes, and is there some way to relax some of those codes?
Well, I think one of the things when you look at maybe a home that was built in the 1900s and hasn't been updated, to get it up to the 2021-2022 standards is nearly impossible for it to be worthwhile financially. It's such a burden financially, and so one of the things that we've looked at is how can we get it safer and make those incremental steps of saying, hey, let's get the electrical updated, let's get some of these other things updated and have some more flexibility in that, versus saying it's 2021 or nothing. Because what happens is those homes sit. And you don't see the change in the neighborhood and maybe that pride of home ownership as well to get it up to those standards. So I think it's important that we look at some of those items and have that flexibility, as well as the current design standards. We're all creatures of habit, that this is the way we've always done it, and we've seen some design standards changing where developers will do more of a private development, so they can maybe have narrower streets, rolled curbs versus the more higher cut curbs. The sidewalks are different, and so they do that because it makes more sense. They can get higher density, and the burden is far less than maybe what it would be for them to do traditional housing for that. So I think it's important that we embrace that and find ways that we can incorporate that throughout the city, versus just saying, hey, you can do it private development.
And as Councilor Neitzer mentioned earlier, Southeast Technical College does have their building programs too. So I think if we continue to support them in their efforts and we continue to build partnerships with the trade associations, it will increase the number of people that are entering the building trades and will greatly assist us in the housing needs.
Yeah. Sometimes it's very difficult to control costs when it comes to the cost of lumber and things like that, but one of the major parts of development is the infrastructure. So looking at, is there other ways that we could do things? Could we do low impact development? Could we allow narrower streets when streets are maybe wider than they need to be in neighborhoods? Because you start adding on $20,000 to the cost of each lot with all of the infrastructure. It costs something like, I think right now, $660, give or take, per a foot. So to add all of that infrastructure. So what can we do to have a good, safe neighborhood and have what we need, but have some options maybe? So what can we do?
And I think the other thing to note is what's exciting is each of us and every council member has really been, this has been at our forefront, the administration, ours. We've been embracing meeting with landlords, bankers, the Home Builders Association, contractors, you name it. We've really tried to collaborate with everyone to say, hey, how can we impact this change instead of just lip service? And so you'll start to see some of those changes taking place, and I think that's important to note that just because we are the city councilors, it doesn't all fall on maybe the city council, but all of the collaborative efforts that each and every one of us are doing, which I think is exciting for our city.
And there is a state workforce housing needs in South Dakota, and they're doing an interim study. Do you have any information on what that committee is doing, and are they looking at all of the same concerns that affect Sioux Falls, and is it across the board? Do these concerns affect all the towns and cities in South Dakota?
It really does. It just depends on how many zeros are behind it. You know, really the same challenges are in Madison and Brookings that are in Sioux Falls, T, and Lenox. And so what this interim study group has done is they've compiled a list of strategies and options on the table to say, hey, do we need to look at TIF? Do we need to change it to make it work a little bit easier for the housing area? Are there ways that we can expand the governor's program? Are there sales tax and excise tax rebates? New multifamily property tax classifications. This has been on the radar of the legislature for 15 years, and it's just a little designation, but some of those changes are hard to make. And so a revolving loan fund. There's all these different options on the table that will be coming forward in the legislative session, and so hopefully we'll see some strategies that we can tap into to make our funds go further, because we've put the money in. Now we want the programs that we can help really make a change.
Okay. Well, we have a lot more to discuss as well, so we're going to take a quick break, and we will be back in just a moment.
Hi, I'm Dr. Heggie from Falls Community Health, and today I'm here to talk to you about the importance of reading to your children. There are so many benefits to reading to your children, and you should start from an early age. Reading can help your child expand his or her vocabulary. Listening skills are important too, and being read to can help kids develop these skills. Stories can help children learn important life lessons and can also add to their social and emotional development. Finally, reading can be a great bonding activity. Spending a few minutes at the end of a hectic day with a good story is a great way to connect. Contact your doctor if you have any questions about your child's development. And don't forget to sign up for a free library card if you don't already have one.
Well, welcome back to Inside Town Hall, where we are having a roundtable discussion with City Councilor Christine Erickson. We have Rick Kiley and Greg Neitzert. Thanks for continuing with us. We have talked about workforce development and housing needs. Now let's talk a little bit about apartments and what role apartment complexes play in housing here in Sioux Falls.
Well, we're adding thousands of jobs to the community. We have Amazon, we have CJ Foods, we have employers growing. We have 1.9% unemployment. And so they have to live somewhere, all of these people that are coming in. And we can't build houses fast enough. Not everybody is ready to own a house. Everybody is at different stages of housing. So that's why multifamily is so important. And that's why we're having a building boom in apartments. We literally have $200 million in permit value for multifamily, which is double last year almost. So as we build all of this housing, we start to run into some of those conflicts, because we're very, very set in single family housing, and that's what people are used to. But now we have twin homes, we have fourplexes, we have apartments, and everybody needs somewhere to live, and we cannot build fast enough. We don't have enough land. So we're building a lot of apartments, and that starts to bring some conflicts. And that's what we've all dealt with on our years on the City Council, and they've been very emotional.
Let's talk a little bit about what those conflicts are and why. Is there a stigma attached to apartment buildings and apartment complexes?
Generally, there really is. It's going to impact my property. My property value will be diminished. Too much traffic, too many. The stigma around who lives in apartments is really unfortunate, because I lived in an apartment for many years. I mean, I have family members that still live in apartments, and people that live in apartments and choose to live there are not bad people. It's their choice. And so according to a study performed by the City of Sioux Falls earlier this year, apartments have virtually no effect on nearby homes' value. And those are just the raw facts of it just doesn't have an impact, contrary to what folks believe. The city looked at 19 apartment and townhome complexes throughout the city, the majority of which had been built over the last 2 decades. And truly, when they came back, they just did not find that there was any major impact on the value of the home. And I think that's important for people to understand. Well, maybe you don't want to live by that. I think it's important that when you choose to live somewhere and there's vacant land, you don't know what that's going to be in the future. It could be apartments, it could be a Walgreens, it could be who knows. And so it has to make sense, and we have a plan for that, but we have to be able to allow these apartment complexes to go in to be able to house all these people that are coming into our community.
As Councilor Erickson mentioned, the city did take a look at 19 different apartment complexes, and then they looked at 123 homes that were within 2,500 feet of the apartment complexes, all of which had been sold at least once before and after the complex was built, along with 26 what they called control homes that were at least 2,500 feet away from any apartment complex. And as she stated, they did not find that it negatively impacted their home value. And it was a very well conducted study. They actually, you're talking to this science teacher from my high school days past. They incorporated scientific research methodology in doing this by including a control group as well as an experimental group. So it's tough to deny the facts involved in this matter, and I think the study bears that out very well.
Well, I think there's this old notion that people live in apartments because they can't get a house. However, we know a lot of people that choose to live in apartments because there's no lawn to mow, there's no snow to shovel. There's a lot of elderly people that choose to live in apartments. And do you think when, you know, we've talked many years about getting to know your neighbors. You know, even when people were complaining about their neighbor because their yard got too long, or, you know, their property became an eyesore, every city councilor has always talked about go over and just knock on the door before you complain and say, hey, is there something wrong? Can I help you? Would that be something that you could get behind and say, you know, yeah, there are 30, 40 people living in an apartment complex. Go over and meet your neighbors. Why does it seem like people who live in apartments are isolated? Do you see that?
You know, I think that with many of the new complexes that are going up around the city, that generally now they're building community rooms and recreational facilities suitable for adults as well as the children. And I think you bring up a great point, Madeline. Should apartment complexes form their own neighborhood associations? We have that with single-family homes throughout the city and neighborhoods, and I think it would serve the individuals that live in these complexes to form their own associations as well too.
And I would also encourage neighborhood associations that exist to invite those people that live in the apartments. Invite them to your neighborhood block party, invite them to your meetings, work together. I mean, so if there's some issues that the homeowners are seeing, have dialogue, talk about it rather than being, you know, fractured. And you noted it. I think the important thing to note is a couple things. First of all, rents in apartments are typically, you know, can be over $1,000. Many times the rent of an apartment is more than what many people's mortgage is. So it may not be an affordability issue. We have people who have fast-paced lives. Young people have fast-paced lives. Twin homes, villas are selling very, very well because they have HOAs, because they don't have to mow the lawn, they don't have to shovel the snow. They don't want to spend time doing that. Empty nesters are buying villas and townhomes all over the place as well because they just don't want to deal with that stuff anymore. People are changing their dynamics of how they want to live. They want to have experiences. Maybe they don't want to mow the lawn. People live in all of these things. And the last thing I want to point out is that we're very thoughtful about where we put apartments. Every time we develop a subdivision or we look at these, we always try to have the lowest density housing on in the interior of the neighborhood, and then as it comes out to the big roads, the arterials, we get higher and higher density because there is more traffic with apartments and in some of your higher density uses. So we try to put it at the busy roads. We don't put an apartment in the middle of a neighborhood. And that being said, though, people tend to assume the worst of anything new. That's just what we all do. So people assume that there's going to be a lot of traffic, there's going to be a lot of crime and everything else, and then it gets built and it just doesn't happen. So it always works out, but we're very thoughtful about where we put apartments.
And we always try to transition from single-family home to twin homes to townhomes and then to the apartment complexes, and the apartment complexes as they progress in size from there. So we are conscious of that. One of the complaints we often hear from residents that object to an apartment complex near them is that, why are we building more because there's so many vacancies? And that's simply not true. Right now, just barely over 3% of those apartments are available. So there is a market market shortage, and we do have to address the housing needs of the individuals that we hope to attract to Sioux Falls, especially with 2 major businesses soon to open up. That's going to bring well over 1,000 jobs to the community.
Sure. Okay. Well, we've talked a lot about housing, and there are other topics going on in the city of Sioux Falls. Let's quickly talk about liquor licenses. What's going on in the liquor license?
Yeah, I think what is an exciting time is the 2020 census came back, providing the numbers were higher than I think anticipated, which allowed more liquor licenses to be available. State law limits sale of liquor, packaged liquor by population, and so that's where we get the numbers. Back in 2019, the full city council repealed an ordinance that had a wait list. What we were seeing is a wait list of 17 to 20 people on this, and oftentimes the folks on the wait list didn't have any intention of maybe using it, but maybe reselling it at a higher value. So we as a council got rid of that, and at the time we thought we had several years. Well, it's been 2 years, and so now what we just found out is that all 17 on the wait list will receive their liquor license, as well as 1 additional license that will be available on January 1st. So I think the key is, now that the wait list is gone and we have 1 more liquor license available, how do we award that? And so I think it's exciting for the administration, a time that they can draft a policy that they're going to use and work into the future for the liquor licenses. That will come before the city council when they are ready, but my hope is that we see that by January 1 so we can give those liquor licenses available. It's an economic development type thing. When you have a liquor license, it's sales tax, and we know that there's far more than 17 people that would like to have one of those licenses. So I think more to come on that, but there's several available.
Okay, and we just have a couple of minutes left. Let's talk about the 2022 legislative session. It's going to be just around the corner. What are some of the topics that will be important during the legislative session that will affect the city of Sioux Falls?
I think we do need assistance from the state, and hopefully they'll allow us to tap into some of the ARPA funds that are available to them, and they make them available to us so that we can address our water needs and our waste, in particular our wastewater needs too, so that we can grow as a city, and that we can also bring in additional regional partners too, so that we can enjoy a certain economy of scale by regionalizing the system versus just keeping it local. So that's one major area that I think we need to address.
And from the summer study on housing, there's many bills that may come forward that may be beneficial to all communities, ourselves included. And so I think that's really important. It's something, of course, that I'll be watching very closely, because there's going to be a lot of action in cannabis with marijuana, and that will directly impact us. I mean, so if recreational becomes law, then we're going to have to deal with that. And so I think what's important to me is that we have local control, so we can make those choices as to what we think is appropriate for our community. But there's going to be a lot of things around that area.
Okay.
I think additionally too, one that I've been working on for 7 years now, the newspaper industry is changed greatly. Not only in the last 7 years, but in the last decade or two. And I think I personally would like to see a central clearinghouse for all the public notices, not just for the city of Sioux Falls, but for the counties and all the other local jurisdictions. One system located maybe out of Pier, in which anybody could just simply go through the file, select Sioux Falls, and look at all the notices from the city of Sioux Falls or Minnehaha County, and select all the notices that impact the Minnehaha County residents. There could be a great savings to everybody. It just hours, generally $80,000 a year for those public notices. In an election year, it's well over $100,000.
Okay. Great. Well, that's our time for this episode of Inside Town Hall. Thank you all for joining us. If you are looking for more news and information surrounding the city of Sioux Falls, you can get that at siouxfalls.org. Thanks for watching.